FlexedTie is a designer like no other, especially when it comes to Horizon Worlds. Today, we're going to be seeing why his apartment has killer design in both senses of the word. Now, let's dive right in. Welcome to 49th Grove Street. My goodness, this place is breathtaking. Look at the art, the design, it's luxury everywhere you look. And I gotta tell you, this is my third time being here. I absolutely love this place. We're gonna be giving some critical feedback, so someone even who's on top of their game like FlexedTie can actually see how they can improve. So the first place I think we should take a look at is this dining room. I mean, I remember the first time I came in here, and this chandelier is just incredible. Absolutely incredible. I believe it's made out of shapes, and you'll note that if you jump up in here, which is something I do by default, I just love jumping on things, you can actually see that he's actually gone and made all of this non-collidable. Means less has to be interacted with the physics engine. Now it's interesting because then you have this, which is a mesh that is like probably worse than all of this being made non-collidable. Like if you made this non-collidable but left all of these collidable, I'm pretty confident this is far more taxing on the physics engine than these are. And the reason is because of the number of vertices in this mesh-based object. Each triangle that makes up this shape has to be calculated against, whereas each of these only represents one individual position per object. These are just kind of like little things, but when it comes to your final product, especially if you're building like an interactive game and you really want it to have like the best, highest frame rate and all of that, that's where this stuff comes into play. So honestly, not a big deal here in an apartment. These chairs are luxurious. You got the soft cubes here with some nice hard edges to kind of contrast it. Really well done. Walking into this little sitting room here, we've got this mesh-based shape here. What we know about meshes is they take up a lot of geometric complexity, which eats into your player count. And so if we look at this world, it's fitting 23, which isn't bad. We're going to talk about why that's not great in a minute, because 23 is quite a few people. Like if you wanted to hang out here with 23 people, that'd be pretty awesome, right? I mean, just aesthetically, this place is like breathtaking. Absolutely phenomenal job. Everything looks super luxurious and modern. You've got these absolutely insane ceilings, which we'll also talk about in a minute. And just look at the detail on this wood here. I mean, can you believe what you're seeing here? It's just like plank, and nice little like LED lighting in there. I know it's not like actually LEDs, but it's so good. And look, you're already seeing the kitchen and you're just going to be blown away by this. I mean, look at this kitchen. You got this magnificent countertop. You got little bar seating here, really cool little like secondary sink, or is this the only sink? Or you'd have like a little water. Anyway, I love kitchens. Kitchens are like one of my passions in life. I know it's a weird thing to have a passion for, but I just love kitchens. And just look at the backsplash here. I mean, this backsplash is, I don't have words. I do not have words for this backsplash. I still don't. I've seen it several times now, and it's so good. And, this is where, I mean, we really got to be critical here. So like, look at this view. There's no view. I mean, there's literally no view here. Very much lacking in this space is you don't have that sort of like really nice background to kind of keep things coming together. So that could be an improvement here. Of course, literally when you're talking about the complexity, 23 players doesn't give you a lot to do in the background. I think you could use like text objects to really like expand upon that, especially because I believe the 23 player limit in this world is due to geometric complexity, and text doesn't take up geometric complexity. It's only going to take up your simulation and animation. And since there's probably a ton of simulation and animation, as there's almost no interaction in this world, you could probably design a really great skyscape with a text-based object. Now, I did want to point out this backsplash because there's a couple instances where this becomes a problem. So when you start looking at this backsplash, I'm not sure if it comes through on video, but it is really heavily flickering between the edges. You've got this 3 dimensions here where you've got a bright top here and a dark here. And so there's a space in your world where you have this again, and because it's oriented 90 degrees this way, it doesn't seem to have this same issue. But if we get to about here and any further back, we really get heavy flickering along those lines where the black shadow on the bottom and the white highlight on the top starts to flicker together. And so, one thought is just adding more gaps. It's important to note that this is glorious. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal, especially up close. The problem really is just in VR because we don't have high fidelity headsets to the point where you can't see the pixels. And because we can see the pixels, that's where you start to see these little nuances start to appear. From this way, you start to see it get worse and worse further down. The other thought, though, was cut it in half and then just stretch it out. And then the last thought we had was if you select all of these, open up the properties panel, you can turn off light and shadow. And we thought potentially turning off light and shadow might cause these not to have the shadowy edges and therefore remove that flicker as well. But I gotta say, I mean, it's still, like I said, phenomenal backsplash, really great work, just kind of like some ideas on how you can improve it. Now, one thing you might not have noticed is there's these little privacy glass buttons. So we're gonna go ahead and turn the kitchen privacy glass. So you can darken it, which is pretty cool. You can also do it for the living room, which is nice. You can actually click it again to turn them back open. And so there you go. And that's just a really nice little detail that I definitely adore. And oh my gosh, look at this living room. So first of all, I love this ceiling. I just love this ceiling. I love the little pieces of art over there. Amazing. And you've just got so much room in here. I mean, it's like, look at this. This is so cool. I mean, I don't have words for how amazing this world is. I mean, it really is so good. And so just looking at this, you can see some really cool meshes coming together to give you some unique soft edges that we just never saw before in Horizon. And I'm really excited to continue seeing how these meshes improve the aesthetic of all of our worlds. I know there's kind of like a lot of hidden gems inside there. I'm constantly like trying to create assets out of my favorite little meshes and just save them for later. This is just, a really nice space. And just since we're being critical, I just want to talk about the height in this world and just a couple things about VR that I think you should know about. So in VR, we have a limited field of view. And so often I've actually tried to build things to scale and it never works. Because of our limited field of view, when you try to build rooms or houses, what you end up happening is everything feels smaller. You don't have that extra vision over here. Like I can see the camera in the real world, but theoretically I should be seeing the rest of this apartment. And so that makes it feel smaller. And so building this big isn't actually a problem, at least not at this stage, because of our limited field of view. This feels pretty decent. It feels like, a billionaire's mansion. I don't know how much money you need to have to own this, but I don't think $1 million's enough. So, you know what I mean? The other thought that I had, though, is if you look at these ceilings, I was measuring it yesterday, and I mean, we're talking like 30 feet here. This is just kind of crazy. And if you come into the kitchen, while it looks really cohesive from this view, and, you've got this really cool wine rack, like, look at this. And I mean, this art here is just, like I said, the art in this world just blows me away. It takes my breath every single time. But there's this huge problem where, like, I can totally use these chairs to eat here. But if I wanted a functional, like, this is what I mean when I talk about like too high. You can't reach this, right? Like, obviously you're not meant to. It's meant to be aesthetic, and that's okay. So I'm not asking FlexedTie to go and remove his stuff down. This looks great. But I think it's worth noting so you guys are aware that when you start building in VR, you might have a lot of things that aren't necessarily functional and are just there for the art. And people might not realize, oh yeah, I can't actually get up into these shelves without jumping on the counter. What am I, like 4 years old? And so you get these kind of like weird things that start to happen. I really think this is all going to come into play in the future when we start to see larger fields of views. Like, you're going to come back to this place in a few years, maybe 5, 10 years now, and be like, this place is way too huge. This does not look anything like I remember. And I kind of say this is akin to when you were a kid and the gymnasium was massive and then you grew up and then it was smaller. And I think it's going to be the inverse of that. Like, we're going to come back here and be like, oh, this is way, way too big. Like, it's pretty big right now. Like, I'd almost say this space is too big at this current state. And can you imagine what it'll be like when it actually feels massive? So, those are just kind of things to think about. And the reason I want you to think about it is because there are businesses that want to build their model homes in VR, and you could do it to spec, but it won't feel the same as it would in the real world. And I do not think we can at this point give that exact experience. So the only thing we can do is kind of give a similar experience where you build it to spec and then you select it all and just scale it just a little bit so that it feels right. Now let's go ahead and take a look upstairs. And I mean, just as we're going this way, look at the lighting through this. Like, okay, that just got really bright, but for a moment there, I loved it. Now it's really bright, which I also kind of like, but I really loved what I saw a second ago. I'm sure you guys saw it in the videos. Super strange how that changed. Coming around here, there is one thing I have to draw your attention to, and it's these LED lights. First of all, phenomenal LED lights. Look at the design there, it's just insane. And I'm sure this looks great on video. Like, I bet this looks incredible in the video, but I have to warn you, in VR, this will give you a headache. But when we look at this, what is it that causes this to give people headaches in VR? And the answer's surprising, but maybe not as surprising as you might think. And so when you start looking at this in detail, what you really start to realize is there's a lot of contrast. It's the lights and the darks just flashing next to each other. And the further back we go, the worse it can become. Like, there are many ways you can improve this, whether it's like taking the blacks and making them a lighter brown, or maybe it's just taking this and making it spread apart further. I'm not sure the right answer. What I can tell you is that you do not want to ever do patterns like this. It's you're going to see quite a few of them in here, honestly. And I'm not feeling it right now, but I remember my first time in here, I definitely remember these high contrast patterns were not super pleasant. And so I just say be careful with them. You definitely never want to have like tiled floors or just like this sort of hard lines on the walls. So just be careful, kind of, play with it. I think in this world, it's going to... By no means am I asking FlexedTie to go remove this and try again. I really do love how this looks. And I think for this world, he should leave it. I mean, it's a testament. He spent a lot of time working on it. And it's only a small corner, so it's probably going to be something they just walk past. But if this was in your main world and this was like the entire space could see this area, I would definitely consider reworking it because you don't want people having an uncomfortable experience, which is what will happen with these sort of high contrast patterns. Without further ado, let's head on upstairs. This is fantastic. I mean, look at all this. This is just continuing this art theme everywhere you look. Just so gorgeous. We're going to take a quick peek in here. Another bedroom. I say another bedroom because I actually don't think I've been in this one. I've been in, oh, you know what? I was in this one because I love this. And so you can see he's using a metal texture here to make it look like silk. And it looks so good. So this is one of the new assets. It's relatively high capacity cost. I think it's like 2% of your geo for this one object. I recently just pulled it out in one of my worlds. But seriously, it looks really good. And it just adds a great feel to this world. I mean, look at this. I just in the art and the tub and the toilet. And we're going to... so like, oh, it's so good. There's just so much to love about this world. From an aesthetic perspective, there is no denying that this thing is on the next level. People are going to be dying to build worlds like this. And if you come into Horizon Worlds and you see something like this, you're going to be like, oh, snap. I had no idea you could do something this amazing in Horizon Worlds. I mean, look at 3 layers of pillows. This is like hotel level quality, man. We've got another privacy glass window. This is kind of nice, but I honestly just am like disappointed that there isn't more things to do, more interaction in this world, something to keep people engaged. So it's definitely something where this is cool, but I think it's kind of gimmicky at this point because really it's the only thing you can engage with in here. I do love this lighting though. Wow, that is so cool. And we've got even more really amazing lighting coming up. Like, look at this one. I'm curious if this is going to do that glow we saw happen earlier where we saw it look like this and then it turned to a giant white beam, but so far it's staying the same. And so this is what I was saying about the other one that oh, never mind. It just blew up. Isn't that strange? Isn't that strange? Some weird way Horizon's rendering their lights. So interesting. Continuing our walk, we can see down into here. Look at this. He told me he hand placed each and every one of these. Look at that. I mean, that is so much work, but they're absolutely gorgeous. I think it's from a flower petal or something. And just the way that like comes together, that has got to be 5 to 10% of the world's geometric complexity, if not more. That could even be 20%. I have no idea. But that is expensive. Absolutely gorgeous. But like capacity wise, oh boy. So like, look at, you got another one over here. Looks like this is the same thing, but stretched out. Just, I love it. I love this space so much. Continuing around the corner, we've got some really nice glass here. Love the way this looks. Can you believe that this wasn't possible a year ago? Until we discovered that new tab hack where you can actually make glass like this wasn't even possible. It's just, this space is evolving so fast. And half of it is because of people like you discovering tricks like this. I mean, honestly, so if you find something, leave a comment on anything. Just share that information. And if we find it on Vidyuu, we're going to get that information out to everybody. Vidyuu tutorials, everybody. Subscribe there if you want to learn how to build amazing worlds like this. Like, that's our goal, is to help level up the community and share amazing tips. And oh my goodness, this is just so much fun to look at. I just absolutely adore this light fixture. Okay, coming into the master bedroom, we've got a FlexedTie kind of classic where he takes a walk-in closet and turns it into his closet of doors. So this is really nice. You can see some of his work. Gets a little loud. Curious about this logo that's kind of tripping out over here. I'm not a huge fan of the Z-ripping. I'm not sure if that's intentional. I don't think it is, though, because you can't see it up close, but from far away, it starts a Z-rip. I'm not sure if you can see it in the video. Some more amazing art. I literally cannot get over how aesthetically pleasing this world is. You guys got to come and visit this. We've got another privacy button. This little like loop-de-loo thing here, I don't know where that came from. I don't know if he made that himself, but absolutely adore that. That is just like, it just feels like there might be physics in this world, you know? Like it really just feels so much more real with that. Okay, let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 if you snuggle up real tight. And if you roll a couple cats on the side of this, oh, you can fit so many people on this bed. Like so many people. All right, going into the master bathroom. Okay. This is what we want to talk about. But the rocks over there, this tub, again, this tub blows me away. I mean, just look at this. I actually spent a lot of time trying to figure out how he did the water in here and just like not nitpicking, but like trying to pick it apart and figure out how it was done, because you can't use the cube for this. And so I was wondering if maybe it was a skewed text object, but what we determined is it's the old method of text shapes where you use alpha. And so if we look down here, you can actually see there's a little bit sticking out. It's kind of hard to get to, but there's a little bit of the text object sticking out. And I gotta say, that actually looks like a pretty hard edge, although that might just be how it renders on desktop. So it's hard to say what shape he's using in here, but absolutely gorgeous tub, absolutely. And we continue on to these rocks. These are the leaves from the oak tree. We use them as asteroids in world tours. Got a black toilet. Not a huge fan of the black toilet, but if that's what you're into, go for that. This is interesting. Look at this. It's so next level. It's amazing. Oh, and then we have the shower. And this is where I was telling you, this looks good. Unlike the other one, this doesn't start to Z-rip at this distance. It doesn't start to have that kind of flickering look. So what's happening, in my opinion, here is the lights and the shadows are so much further apart that they don't get a chance to cause that flickering that was happening on the edges before. And if you look here in the middle isn't highlighted and shadowed. They're the same kind of mid-tone. So they're both slightly shadowed. It's not like a highlight and a shadow next to each other. So I do think that this is a fantastic implementation of that backsplash. But when it's rotated sideways, it's not looking right. So my personal opinion on how to fix the one in the kitchen is to select them all and turn off that light and shadow, as we mentioned earlier, because then you get to keep the same aesthetic. So you get that kind of like matching look. Oh, and look at the tiles on the floor. And their inlet too. Like this requires quite a bit of work. So you could do this two ways, right? Like you could put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines down for just the grout and have the grout raised up. But what you'll see here is it's a singular cube behind it with each of these tiles laid on top. So you actually get proper grout lines. And it's a really small detail, and it does cost a few more objects, but these are cubes, so they're actually really affordable in terms of capacity. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's 18, 36 cubes, which makes it about a little over 0.5% of geometric complexity and 0.5% of objects. So it's really not that much to add all of these tiles in. And the grout would save you a few objects, but just having those grout lines, especially in a space that's using so much like geometry from the mesh-based objects. And I think it's worth noting that if you're not in Horizon Worlds, you might not be familiar with when I'm saying mesh, there's actually 3 different types of objects in Horizon. Start with the main 2. You got primitives and you've got assets. And assets from the asset library can be broken into multiple pieces, and then you can use the meshes from there. Like, we don't know what this came from, but whatever it came from, it was probably stretched out to look like this. And the same thing's true with a lot of these shapes, right? Like I told you, these were the leaves from an oak tree. And so going into the asset library and breaking apart these assets to create these amazing meshes is a fantastic way to create unique, really cool looking spaces that you're not going to see anywhere else. And FlexedTie does a phenomenal job of that. So when we talk about like meshes, if you come from any sort of like Unity background, you're probably familiar that almost everything in here is a mesh, right? Except for this cube. except for maybe a perfect sphere if you can find one in here, which I think is unlikely. But perfect cubes and spheres are the only things that are non-mesh based. Everything else is a mesh. So if it's a pyramid, if it's a triangle, it's a mesh. And there are quite a few cubes in here. Okay, so like there's a lot of cubes, and that's okay. But when we talk about meshes in Horizon, most of the time we're actually talking about the asset meshes because we call the other ones primitives. And so when we talk about meshes in Horizon, we're often just talking about these really unique shapes you couldn't have made without using something that you tore apart in the asset library. These pillows, these are meshes from the asset library. We have to bring up the elephant in the room. And I mean no disrespect to FlexedTie. I am a huge fan of his work. I mean, an absolute huge fan. In fact, he actually has a piece featured in one of our upcoming builds. So like, absolutely a fan. And I've already talked to him about most of these things. So this hopefully isn't a shocker to him. But this world is not a good world to sell. I mean, it's a space that if you bought this expecting to throw house parties here and you're like, I'm going to go grab some assets out of the asset library, because there's some really cool like assets. You could put down a pool table here. You could put in some interactive games from Sandwich, and there's just lots of really cool things. Or Vidyuu has a cup throwing game, and there's just so many really cool assets. But the reality here is you couldn't add them without lowering your player capacity. I mean, look at this. You're at 23 players already. That is 9 of your 32 players have already been lost to geometric complexity cost in here. And that's huge. There's tons of simulation and animation capacity left in here, but you need geometric shapes to be able to build. So there's a geo cost to everything you add. If you think about these little like windows here, somebody's going to want to put in their cityscape behind this. And there's just so many things that are going to hold this back from being a really great world. Like if I bought this, and I would pay good money for this because it's great design work, I would be very quickly disappointed when I realized I had to delete part of the world to make anything fit. I mean, that's the reality in this space, is the person who would buy a world like this or that is going to have to make some compromises. That's not a fun decision to have to make. And so when you look at some of this art on the wall, and I think, it's so good. It really is. But you might only do one piece on the wall, right? Like you might choose your favorite here, and maybe you have like a library. You could even put in, with a little bit of scripting magic, and there's actually some assets in the asset library you could use for this. You could put a button here that swaps out the art piece that's on display, and you make it really big. And now you've got 6 pieces that are just assets that you can load in and out. And so you're not actually taking up all of the geo costs, just one at a time. This here, I absolutely adore this piece, but I can't imagine the geometric cost of all of these individual meshes. So I would probably go through and delete, 25 to 35% of those, because I think the feeling would stay, but you would have, that much back. And so what I would encourage you to do, FlexedTie, or anybody else who's building really great design worlds like this, you gotta add some interactivity so people can delete and replace it later. And in my opinion, this is just adding a few little games around the world. And what this is gonna do is it's gonna hone you in as you're building, so you don't spend too much geo on things you can't, take back. You put in the little asteroid game that Sandwich and Victor Riddle put together. Or there's some other really cool little mini games in the asset library, including one by Vidyuu, the cup game we mentioned a second ago. This place has no reason to be here other than to see it once, get the view, appreciate it, and then leave. And if you had some small interaction, even if it wasn't even if you weren't planning to sell this world, I'm not sure if you are or not, but if you just wanted people to hang out here and enjoy the space, it needs something to do. And maybe one day we get some sort of video player where you can put some videos on the TV and people can actually hang out in a space. But for now, this space is gorgeous, but empty. And that kind of breaks my heart, because you're one of the best designers in Horizon and people should be enjoying this space. And so I'd give you kind of a couple tips from Rexrod and Victor Riddle, who've put together some really amazing meta homes. In Rexrod's house, he's got a campfire where people just sit around and talk. And that kind of it has some movement. So I think it keeps people engaged and kind of just hanging around. It has a feeling like those little bits. And Rexrod didn't know how to script. I mean, almost everything was just hand animated. And so really, you got to think about just little things. You don't have to be super technical or skilled with scripting. I know it's hard. I really do. I spent several months just getting started myself. Having been here for 2 years, it's easy for me to say, here's all the things you can do. And it's so simple and easy. But The reality is, it is hard. But you can do just some simple animations that I think will keep this place lively. You think about like in Rex's meta home, he's got a little like Alexa here with a hand animated spinning light on the top, which makes it just feel like it's movement. And just those little bits of detail, I think, bring this space to life. And that's really what's lacking here. It's life, it's things to do. I do think the space is a little big if we start talking about this. I'm going to say this in almost every world I go to. When I say this space is big, I'm not talking about the height of it. What I mean is you need to be able to see people. When somebody enters that door, they should be able to, within 30 seconds, find the person they're looking for. In Horizon Worlds, you're almost always joining on somebody else. Unless you're brand new and you've never been here before, you're likely joining because your friend is there. And so if your friend is up in that bedroom and you walk in and you spend 60 seconds walking through and you don't find them because you went into that bedroom instead, or maybe you looked around, this whole area, and you're like, oh, I couldn't find them, whatever. Maybe they already left. That happens. I was in a world literally yesterday and they couldn't find me. And I was actually following behind them trying to say hello, but I was just too far behind. And they left before I even got to them because they hit a door. And so I chased after them, found them, and then we came here. But you got to think like, that's a reality is people are in for a social experience. And if they can't find the person they're looking for, they just leave. So FlexedTie, I got to say, amazing work here. Well, guys, this has been my review of 49th Grove Street by FlexedTie. Absolutely fantastic world. I hope you guys get a chance to check it out in Horizon, and I'll see you there. So theoretically, the B-roll just comes out of my hand and goes...